3, 2, 1.
So this morning I have a few questions I want to start with. First of all, I want to ask you, do you get a thrill when you look at a long page full of activities and tasks that you plan to accomplish? And if so, are they categorized, color-coded with little boxes next to them so that you can check them off once you're done with them, or maybe highlight them or just cross them off when you complete them? And at the end of a productive day, do you smile at your accomplished long list, seeing it as a trophy or a badge of honor, perhaps, knowing you had done well that day? You got through your to-do list. How long do we spend each day or each evening? Maybe it's one of the last things you do at the end of your work day or at the end of your day, taking the time to make this list. And it may be a list you may not complete, but you have this long list of tasks. And if you don't get through it, is there some sort of rollover that you've decided is okay, like your cell service? And if you don't get to the bottom of that list that day, do you feel a little bit of depression? Do you feel like you haven't been successful? That would not be a fun day, to end your day feeling you weren't that successful. Well, I'm here to advise you to throw away your to-do lists. I know it's a time management thing, and I get it. You want to make sure things get done that you might forget, in the hustle and bustle of getting things accomplished each day. And I also understand the intention to have productivity. Having a list is a productive thing, making sure tasks don't get lost in the shuffle there. However, lists and deadlines can also be potent procrastination tools, and sometimes they act as an addiction. We get addicted to these lists of tasks we have to do. A gentleman named Ralph Ryback wrote in Psychology Today, and he said, the satisfaction of ticking off a small task is linked with a flood of dopamine. Each time your brain gets a whiff of this rewarding neurotransmitter, it will want you to repeat the associated behavior. It will want you to repeat the associated behavior every day, over and over, like a sugar addiction, an almost never-ending merry-go-round of ups and downs and moods, a cycle of reward and emptiness, need and emptiness and reward, and round, over and over and over again. And too many times, especially at work, we start craving another feel-good moment. Our brains are often encouraging us to complete even a low-level task of something before we do something that really matters, just to get that dopamine. Well, I'll do this. I'll get this off my list. Oh, something off my list. Yeah, I love that feeling. Check mark, the crossing off. It's a false sense of joy and satisfaction. And too often, it's us just avoiding the projects that may be a little more difficult, maybe will take a little more time, but are too often the true game changers in our lives and in our work days and our regular at-home lives. And I have Post-it notes in my computer, on my computer, and hard copies on my desk or on my monitor. And yes, I do get a thrill in their completion. I get a thrill when I delete it from my computer screen. I have a little Post-it app there, and I get a thrill taking that. Here's one now. Taking that, crumbling it up, and tossing it into the trash can. I get it. I totally get it. There's a gentleman named Eyal, he's a behavior design and productivity expert. He wrote, "It's not that keeping a list of things that you need to get done is a bad idea. It's the fact that people run their days on their to-do lists. That's what's very harmful." Let me repeat that. It's the fact that people run their days on their to-do lists. That's what's very harmful. Experiencing flow in your day-to-day work. You ever get into that flow? No matter what the particular day is like, you get into that flow. That's what is the integral component of creativity and mental and physical health. That flow when you're in a special project, when you're in a when you're so focused and you're surrendering in that moment everything else around you. Usually that's when that happens. When we're in that flow, when we're in that focus, we usually boost innovation, we usually boost the meaning and the engagement and the productivity. It's not about the task necessarily, it's about the intention. So as we declutter this month, I want to encourage something more important than doing, and that is being. Getting into the flow of our highest state of mind, beginning our day, not with lists, but with listening. Beginning our day at home, at work, both, not with lists, but with listening. In the blog, The Blissful Mind, Catherine Beard ends her article on how to organize and declutter your to-do list with this recap. And she says, when it comes to your never-ending to-do list, stick with 3 principles. Get it out of your head, let go of shoulds, and prioritize mindfully. And then in another article by PhD Christy Hegstad, who is a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, she agrees in this article called The Productive Power of Your Daily Type 3, she agrees with the idea of prioritize. So what are you prioritizing? Are you prioritizing that list, the Post-it notes, the various things I have to do? Or are you prioritizing who you are, what my intention is, what my purpose is in life, as well as today on this day? Getting out of our heads is probably the best priority in order to get things done, the best priority to be able to be in a zone of manifesting our best experiences and getting into the flow of successful living. In general, if we're not there in general, we're not going to be there in the specified time, the specified task. When we prioritize focusing on the now, distractions are minimized and flow is optimized. I want to read you a little story that comes from the Mahabharata. And this is a story about the master Dronacharya, and he teaches archery as well as many other things, but this particular day he was teaching archery to his many students. The story goes like this. Dronacharya hung a wooden crow that he carved out of wood, on a tree branch. And then he summoned all his students to come. And he told the students that they were to take their arrow, hit the arrow in the crow's eyes, okay, into the wooden crow's eyes. And so then he lined them up. He lined them up and told them that they must answer a question first before they start firing. So first, his student Duryodhana took up his stance and got ready and pulled back the bow, and teacher said, so what can you see? And the student says, I see the bird, I see the garden, I see the tree, the flowers, everything. And the teacher told him to put his bow down and step aside. He did so. And the next student, Yudhishthira, stepped up, and his answers, he pulled his bow back and he was ready, and teacher asked him the same question, and his answers were similar. I see the air and leaves blowing in the wind. And Dronacharya told the student that he too must put his bow down and go back into his place in line. On and on, the master teacher asked the same question to the other students, most giving the same or similar answers as the first two. And some added a little bit. They could see the teacher, they could see their cousins and people standing around. And once they gave those answers, none were allowed to continue. They were told to put their bows down and go back to their place without being allowed to shoot. Even Dronacharya's son, who was part of the class, could not understand what his father wanted. Finally, Arjuna was the only one left, the last student in line. He stepped up, and Dronacharya asked Arjuna to come up and take his stance. And Arjuna picked up his bow and he pulled back. He set the arrow, he drew the string, and his teacher asked Arjuna, "What do you see?" And Arjuna replied, "The eye of the bird." "Can you see the tree?" asked the master teacher. "No, only the eye of the bird," was the answer that Arjuna said. "Well, do you see the tree, the bark, the leaves, the flowers, the fruits? Brothers, cousins? Do you see me?" "No, no, no," answered Arjuna. "I can only see the eye of the bird." And with a smile, the Guru Dronacharya gave him the order, "Then release your bow." And Arjuna released the arrow, and it sped straight to the target, and the wooden bird came tumbling down. Dronacharya embraced the boy and then turned to the others and said, "When you want to achieve something, you must focus on it. Close out all distractions and concentrate only on your target." What is your target? Is it the things on the list or the list itself? Or is it what the list somehow represents? That you're not successful unless you get through this list, that you're not accomplished unless you get through this list. In order to declutter a life of doing, we must focus on being who we are. What is our purpose? What is our intention? Are we revealing the divinity within us? Is that where our focus is? Not the machinations going on in our head, but the combination of the divine matrix, the heart and the gut. Are we listening to the influence and the intuition coming from our gut? Come up with this idea called DCCAR, D-C-C-A-R, D. Decide what your priorities are, the priorities of your heart and soul, not your mind's goals or lists. Not that those are bad. Not that those are bad. But we want to start with our heart full, with our gut and our eyes and ears open to the inspiration from the divine. C, calm your mind down. Shut that brain up. Sometimes we just have to shut it up. Teach it how to follow instead of lead. I know that seems odd. Well, wait a minute. I should lead by my intelligence, my mind. When you put the divine matrix into play, which does also include your mind, we teach it to follow. We teach our brains to follow the lead of our hearts and our intuition. Not that we get sucked into just feelings only. We don't want that. We want the combination, but we don't want the brain to run everything. Connect with, listen to, and trust your higher self. That's what all this is about. I'm not talking about not using your brain or not using your intelligence. I'm talking about listening to and trusting your higher self. Sometimes when we listen to our brain only, we get into ego stuff that will be depressing if I don't get this list done. Ego stuff that this list equates my success in life, my success for today. Your success for today depends on this. Revealing the divinity in you, living that, being that, knowing that, starting there. Starting there. When you start with your higher self, when you listen through your higher self, all this stuff becomes easy. A, act on the guidance from your higher self. Act on the guidance when you are listening in the quiet moments in the morning before you start really getting going for the day. And R, relax. Relax and allow what you desire to come to you, to reveal itself. And I can hear you saying, yeah, but I already know what I want to declare. I already know. I do it in my prayers. I do it in my affirmations. I already know. Then why is it here? Why isn't it here? It isn't here because your clarity is not sufficient. And your clarity comes from revealing the divine, not from the machinations of the brain. Oh, it's part of it because it is part of the divine matrix. But when we open ourselves up, when we awaken to the divine and to the inspiration of the universe of infinite possibilities, then we start to declutter the junk, the old stories, the ego stuff, egoistic stuff. You got to entertain God only, not edge God out. When we begin our day focused on intention and purpose rather than tasks and lists, we get ourselves in the flow of being rather than doing. The doing becomes easier when we are being who we are, when we come from the being. Socrates said, to be is to do. You have to be before you do. Being is what we want to focus, where we want to focus ourselves, where we want our focus to lie, to be, so that the doing is like the bird in the tree. It's easily accomplished because it's what's in our sights. In the 47th chapter of the Tao Te Ching, it teaches this. Without going out the door, know the world. Without peering out the window, see the way of heaven. The farther one goes, the less one knows. Therefore, the sage knows without traveling, sees without looking, and achieves without acting, doing, and especially striving. You don't have to go to the Holy Land to become enlightened, or sit under a tree, or live in a cave up in the Andes to become enlightened, or use your to-do list to become successful. You don't have to look outside of yourself for accomplishments and wisdom because it is all within you. Yes, I understand you want to have allies in your life. You want to have teachings in your life. You come here to receive inspiration and tools. I get that. But you are open to it because you are revealing the divine in you. And in revealing the divine in you and focusing on being, you bring forth into your life that inspiration. You don't even need to seek it. It seeks you. Before you go anywhere or look at anything every day, complete the connection to your true self in here. Do it without acting out here. Do it by acting within, just being and listening. With that as your focus, all else will just fall into place. Declutter. Thank you so much. Namaste.